The sea was unnervingly calm that morning, too calm, as if the Pacific itself was holding its breath. A thin layer of mist rolled across the water, blurring the horizon where grey skies met grey waves. Through that haze, two ships emerged, one bearing the red and gold of the Chinese Navy, the other a smaller but stubbornly defiant Coast Guard vessel, its white hull streaked with salt and age. The distance between them shrank with each passing second. Neither slowed. Neither veered. On the bridge of the Coast Guard ship, Commander Reyes gripped the railing so tightly his knuckles whitened. "Hold course," he ordered, voice steady despite the tension tightening every muscle in his face. Down below, his crew shifted nervously, glancing between radar screens and the looming steel wall that was now barreling toward them. On the Chinese warship, the mood was eerily similar. Eyes locked forward, command shouted in clipped Mandarin, the deep hum of the engines pushing the vessel toward a confrontation no one seemed willing to stop. At 8:42 local time, the inevitable happened. Steel slammed into steel with a deafening crunch that echoed across the waves. The Coast Guard ship shuddered violently, its deck tilting, loose equipment skidding toward the rails. Men stumbled, a siren blared, and seawater frothed between the hulls as they scraped and ground against each other. Over the intercom, a voice barked damage reports: portside hull breach, minor flooding, injured crew. But there was no time to assess. The warship wasn't pulling away. If anything, it was pressing harder. It felt less like an accident and more like a warning, delivered in the most physical way possible. To understand why two ships, backed by nations already teetering on the edge of open hostility, would collide in broad daylight, you have to go back to the days before the mist, before the standoff, to when the South China Sea looked like just another patch of water on a map. It started with a radio transmission. A fishing boat from a small island nation had sent a distress call. Their nets had been cut, their engines damaged, and they claimed a foreign vessel had ordered them out of waters they defished for generations. That call was picked up by the Coast Guard, who dispatched Commander Reyes' ship to investigate. The assignment seemed routine: show the flag, escort the fishermen home, file a report. But the region was far from routine. China had been expanding its presence there for years, building artificial islands, installing radar stations, and patrolling waters claimed by multiple nations. Every encounter carried the risk of miscalculation. As Reyes' vessel approached the coordinates of the incident, they spotted more than fishing boats. On the horizon was the sharp silhouette of a Chinese Type 052 destroyer, its grey hull slicing through the water like a blade. For 2 days, the ships shadowed each other, close enough to see the crews moving on deck, too far to hear what they might be saying. Each maneuver felt like a test, each change in course a question: who would yield first? And then came the moment. The warship turned sharply across the Coast Guard's bow, forcing them into a dangerous proximity. Voices rose on both bridges. Warnings were issued, ignored, repeated. The radio crackled with tension, both sides refusing to back down. By dawn on the third day, the air was thick with unspoken defiance. And when the warship angled in again, there was no more room for evasive maneuvers. The collision was not a surprise. What happened after it was. The moment after the impact was a blur of alarms, shouted orders, and the metallic groan of two massive hulls grinding against each other. On the Coast Guard deck, smoke curled from a ruptured exhaust pipe, and the air reeked of fuel and scorched paint. Men scrambled to seal the hull breach, hands slick with seawater and sweat, their boots sliding across the tilted deck. Commander Reyes steadied himself against the railing, eyes locked on the warship towering above them. Its deck guns loomed silently, unmoving but unmistakably present, a silent reminder of the imbalance in firepower. Then, a voice crackled over the VHF channel, clipped and cold. "This is the People's Liberation Navy vessel Haikao. You are in Chinese territorial waters. Cut engines and prepare to be boarded." Reyes' reply was instant. "Negative. This is sovereign territory under international law. You are to withdraw immediately." A pause. Static hissed like a snake in the speaker. Then came a single, deliberate response: "You are mistaken." The warship pulled back slightly, only to swing its bow again toward the Coast Guard shipper's port side. Less a second collision and more a shove, like a hand against the chest in a crowded room. Below deck, pumps roared as crew worked to contain flooding. In the infirmary, a medic stitched a deep gash on a seaman's arm while another lay strapped to a stretcher, ribs fractured from being thrown against a bulkhead. The entire ship seemed to be holding its breath, bracing for the next hit. Out at sea, nothing exists in isolation. By mid-morning, the confrontation had drawn attention. Over the horizon, radar picked up another blip, an Allied patrol vessel, closing fast. And behind it, far larger signatures, a Chinese amphibious transport and, ominously, a ship carrying what looked to be long-range missile launchers. The sky had shifted too, the earlier haze replaced by a sharp, unforgiving sun. Every detail was suddenly visible. The scorch marks on the warship's hull, the defiant stance of the Coast Guard crew lining their rails, the flicker of binocular lenses from watchtowers on the Chinese ship. Then came the sound, distant at first, then unmistakable. The low thrum of rotors. A helicopter appeared, skimming the waves before climbing into a slow circle above the two ships. Its Red Star insignia left no doubt about its allegiance. Reyes felt the shift instantly. This was no longer a collision at sea. This was a standoff, and it was escalating. The helicopter's shadow swept across the Coast Guard deck, and with it came a spray of rotor wash that rattled loose tarps and sent loose papers spiraling into the ocean. From the warship, a small rigid-hull boat was being lowered into the water, manned by armed sailors in black body armor. Over the radio, the Chinese voice returned, this time almost casual. "Prepare for inspection. We will ensure your safety." The words were diplomatic, but the tone carried the weight of command, as though the outcome had already been decided. Reyes leaned toward his communications officer. "Send a priority signal to command. Situation deteriorating." The reply came back minutes later, encoded but clear. "Hold your position. Reinforcements inbound. Do not initiate hostilities." But holding position was easier said than done. The warship's RHE drew closer, its bow slapping against the swells. The armed boarding party was ready, and Reyes knew that once they set foot on his deck, the balance of control would shift entirely. The crew braced, each man silently running through his own contingency plan. Somewhere in the galley, a coffee pot slid off a counter and shattered. Above deck, the tension was so thick it felt like the air itself might break. The RHIB was now less than 20 meters away. The helicopter hovered lower, its engine scream echoing over the waves. And then, without warning, a new voice cut across the channel. It wasn't Chinese. It wasn't Reyes. It was a sharp, almost panicked broadcast from the Allied patrol vessel still minutes away. Multiple fast craft detected inbound from the northwest. Unknown flags. Speed, 30 knots and climbing. Recommend immediate defensive posture. Reyes' mind snapped through the possibilities. Local fishing boats caught in the wrong place? Pirates? Or something worse? Whatever it was arriving fast, and both sides now had to decide, fight each other or turn to face whatever was coming. The warship's RHB hesitated, its crew glancing toward the approaching wakes. The helicopter banked sharply, its focus shifting. And for the first time that day, there was an opening, an unpredictable variable neither side had planned for. The ocean ahead churned with white wakes, the fast craft cutting through the water like a school of predatory fish. They weren't fishing boats. They weren't pirates. As they closed the gap, Reyes could see their low, angular hulls, military, but unmarked. No flags, no identification numbers, just flat grey steel and men in dark combat gear holding rifles across their chests. Whoever they were, they moved with precision, splitting into a wide arc as if to encircle both the Chinese warship and the battered Coast Guard vessel. The helicopter above shifted position, climbing for a better view, its rotors thundering against the sudden tension. On the warship's bridge, officers shouted orders, the crew scrambling to man stations. The RHO that had been moments away from boarding Reyes' ship swerved sharply, racing back toward its mothership. Even the loudspeaker that had barked threats minutes before now stayed silent, replaced by hurried Chinese voices trading coordinates and bearing updates. Identify yourselves. Reyes ordered over the international hailing frequency. No response. Repeat, identify yourselves or we will take defensive measures. Still nothing. The fast craft closed within 1,000 meters, their wakes merging into one frothing white semicircle. Reyes felt the adrenaline spike in his veins. This wasn't an accident. This was a third player entering the board. The Allied patrol vessel was still too far to help, its radar signature crawling closer but not fast enough. If these unidentified craft were hostile, the Coast Guard ship wouldn't last 5 minutes. The Chinese warship seemed to realize the same thing. Its bowgun swiveled, not toward Reyes, but toward the incoming boats. The RHOB was hauled back on deck in record time. For the first time since the collision, the two crews had the same enemy in sight. Then, through the static, a voice finally came over the radio. The accent was flat, almost mechanical. Stand down. This operation is now under control. You will follow our instructions. No call sign, no country name, just authority spoken like a fact. Reyes XO leaned in. Sir, they're jamming secondary channels. He wasn't wrong. The auxiliary radio was dead, as were encrypted comms. The ship was suddenly cut off from the outside world. The only signals still getting through were on the channel the mystery voice had claimed. The fast craft slowed, drifting into a loose blockade around the two larger ships. The sea was calm again, but in that artificial calm lay the weight of something deeply wrong. One of the boats edged closer, close enough for Reyes to see the strange matte black helmets on its crew. Featureless, visorless, almost insect-like. They didn't look like any Navy he knew. Suddenly, a hatch on the lead craft swung open, and a single figure stepped onto the deck. No weapon in hand, just a slim black case. He raised it slightly, pointing it toward the Coast Guard ship. Reyes squinted against the glare. It looked like a camera. The man pressed something on the side. A sharp burst of static flooded the ship's speakers. Then, the bridge lights flickered. Engine controls went dead. Screens went black. The ship's heartbeat, its power, was gone. The Chinese warship reacted instantly, sounding its general alarm. But it was too late. The same thing happened to them. Lights dying, radars spinning down, the low hum of their turbines fading into silence. Both vessels sat powerless, adrift. Reyes felt the silence in his bones. No engines, no electronics, just the sound of waves against the hull and the faint whistle of wind. EMP? The XO asked. Reyes nodded slowly. Whoever these people were, they'd just neutralized two armed ships without firing a shot. The man with the black case lowered it, gave a short, almost polite nod, and retreated back inside the craft. Then, as abruptly as they had appeared, the fast boats peeled away, vanishing into the open ocean at blinding speed. No explanations, no demands, just gone. It took 32 minutes for the Coast Guard engineers to coax partial power back online. The Chinese warship was doing the same, her crew working feverishly under the watch of armed officers. Reyes stood on the bridge, watching their every move. When their radios finally crackled back to life, command demanded a full report. But there was nothing to report that made sense. In the official version that would later circulate, the collision was downplayed as minor contact and the unidentified craft dismissed as local fishing vessels misidentified under tense conditions. But Reyes knew the truth, and judging by the unreadable expressions on the Chinese officers as their ship limped away, so did they. Somewhere out there in the vast, unclaimed blue, a force neither nation wanted to admit existed had just made itself known. And they hadn't chosen sides. They'd chosen control. The question now wasn't whether another incident would happen. It was when, and whether, next time, anyone would be able to stop them.